Hello and welcome to the Film Ireland podcast. I'm Associate Editor Gemma Cray.
And I'm Editor Stephen Galvin. Today we present Screen Sessions, a series of conversations between filmmakers, kindly supported by Screen Ireland.
We're delighted to speak with actor and accomplished writer for screen and stage Mark O'Halloran.
And today he's speaking with multi-award winning and IFTA-nominated writer-director Katie McNeice.
So thank you so much and enjoy the podcast.
So, Mark, thanks a million for chatting to us. We're on the Film Ireland podcast. The most obvious thing to start off with is the fact that Adam and Paul, one of your most famed and prolific and brilliant films, is turning 20 this year. And it's actually screened this weekend, which will be no use to anyone listening because it'll have come and gone. But this weekend at the Bloomday Film Festival in the IFI. So are you heading to the screening this weekend?
Yes, we're going to do a little bit of a chat beforehand. We have, there's before it, a little curtain raiser, as we'd say, they're screening an encounter, which is an adaptation of the Joyce short story that I did, that Kelly Campbell made. It's actually nearly a half an hour short, and that's going on before it, and then Adam and Paul is going on. The two are kind of related. I picked up on themes of one to the other and all of that. So I will be there. We'll be talking about the influences of Joyce on Adam and Paul, which I don't think many people have picked up on before. But we'll be doing a general chat. I think probably maybe Lenny will be there as well. It'd be nice to just hang out and see. It'd be interesting to see who turns up for it, whether anybody turns up for it. But it'll be interesting to see what kind of people will be there to see it again,
Yeah, they will, definitely. Like, I've actually seen an encounter before at Bloomsday Film Festival. It was standout. I think 'cause it's shot on film as well, which is so unusual for a short.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, what a gorgeous film. And like, so many people will have seen Adam and Paul, like myself, not in the cinema, but like on telly or on a laptop or whatever. Like, to get to see a 20-year-old film on the big screen is just, for film buffs, even if you're not an actual film buff, you know what I mean? To go back, I love how cinemas are doing that now, where they're rerunning stuff. That was really...
Oh, I love that kind of curation. The Lighthouse does a lot of it as well, and it's just going back to see Stop Making Sense or something like that on a Friday night is just glorious.
Yeah, it's absolutely class. And it's like, what I'd love to know though about Adam and Paul is, like, you're actually going to be sitting in the audience, right? You're watching it again after 20 years. Like, are there any kind of butterflies? Just the fact that it's such a landmark screening, like, there's been so much time that's passed since. Like, it was your very first screenwriting credit. Like, is the surrealness of that getting to you in any way?
Well, I mean, the journey of that film has been really strange anyway. Like, I hadn't ever written a screenplay before. I'd never written anything of any length, really. I'd written shorter plays that somebody had seen. And so it was my first screenplay. I literally had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know, I'd never heard of the 3-act structure. I didn't know what these theories of how to structure a film were. And so I was just writing it with my instinct and then deliver. Like, I'd cycle over to Lenny's house with like 20 pages under my arm, and we'd sit and we'd read over the pages and we'd talk about what we thought that was doing and blah, blah, blah. Like, the general idea was there was always going to be sunrise to sunrise and you wouldn't know which one is Adam and which one is Paul. But beyond that, it was a very open book, and, what level of story we put in there or what level of story we took out, and the circularity of the whole thing. And I mean, I remember the first day I sat down to write it, I was going like, do you start a screenplay? So I just said one of them was stuck to a mattress because I thought it was funny, So, and then as I went on, I hadn't planned out the screenplay, so I was able to use sort of a circular thing. The Bulgaria with his jacket at the start became this thing, and then they met a Bulgarian, and like, it was all of this. It was kind of an episodic drama in that way, in the way that it was made. And after a couple of months of writing, or maybe 4 or 5 months of writing these loads of scenes, there was just loads and loads of them. It was just then an act of consolidation. And then we made it really quickly. And then I was in it when I wasn't supposed to be in it. Like, it was a whole series of accidents. And then suddenly it came out. And I can honestly say that Lenny and I never, ever talked about who was going to come to see this. We had no sales agent. We had nothing. We thought that maybe it would be shown, like it's going to be shown at the IFI, and some people will come along and really like it. And then Like in the great scheme of things, it would be forgotten. It just kind of caught a kind of a feeling. It was quite an underground film when it came out. People just started going, and word of mouth was very strong on it. It then there was pirated copies almost immediately doing the rounds, and it suddenly became this thing. And then suddenly we went after the Telluride Film Festival. We went to Berlin with it. Like, that was totally outside of anything we thought would happen. However, we did have serious intent with it. You know what I mean? Like, you know, I remember I was living in and around Parnell Square at the time, and I remember looking out my window and thinking, like, why do we have to have more films about the national question and about the Brits and what the Brits did to us? Like, I was sick of those films. I was like, oh my God, do we have to watch another one of them? And I was looking out my window and I was going like, why isn't the street out there, why isn't that a film? And I'd begun to take, when I moved to Dublin, because I moved to Dublin from Ennis, and I began to take loads of diaries of things that I'd seen homeless heroin addicts do on the street, and things that I'd encountered that I thought were either funny or sad or moving or really aggravating. And that became kind of the backbone. And I wanted to do things like, when you see in the film that you're not able to see which one is Adam and which one is Paul, that's it. That was kind of deliberate on my point of view, because I wanted people to leave the cinema and attempt to name people that they would normally step over. And I thought that was kind of as powerful a thing that you could do with a piece of art or drama or whatever that you could possibly achieve. And, you know, Lenny and I also had serious stylistic thoughts about it being more French than it being American in tone and feeling. The idea of tapping into vaudeville, and the idea of, you know, referencing things like Midnight Cowboy, maybe American Go, but also Bruno Dumont, Laurel and Hardy. All of those things were, our serious intent was there. We did it on a complete micro budget. But we kind of really believed in it in loads of ways. We just didn't think that it had an audience. That was all. Or we never gave further thought to an audience being there. But I do, just to finish this kind of strand of ramble, when we finished the edit suite, Lenny screened it for myself and Tom at Screen Scene in the cinema that they have out the back. And it was the first time we'd seen the finished cut. And Tom hadn't seen any of it, and I had seen stuff, but it had been graded at this point and it was ready to go. So we brought Tom in, and Tom and I sat and we watched it. And I remember I turned to him and I said, nobody can take this away from us. Which like, that's a once in a lifetime. Maybe if you're really lucky, twice or three times, if you're really, really, really lucky in a lifetime for an artist, I think, to feel that a piece of work is exactly as you intended it to be, or as close to as you intended it to be as possible. And I thought that Tom's performance was gorgeous in it. I thought the script held up. I thought Lenny's work was just immaculate, like extraordinary. And so it was a kind of a happy, unpressurized, there was no expectation, and yet we kind of made it out of that in kind of a way.
Yeah, I've heard you say that before in a different interview about turning to Tom, and like, even having heard it before, like, as someone who writes as well for screen, like, I got shivers hearing you say it a second time. I mean, like, I'm not flattering you, like, literally that's what we all want, isn't it? To get to the point where you think, do you know what, I nailed that, because the imposter syndrome is always with you, like this uninvited.
It's always there. And also,
yeah,
with artistic practice, there is failure. You do fail sometimes, and you do not get what you want exactly out of something. And sometimes the people you collaborate, you don't gel together properly. But this was different. And actually, I don't think I've had something as perfect as that has happened in my life since. Like, I've loved the work that I've done afterwards and all of that. But that was something. There was something really magical about it. We had an awful lot of fun making it as well, which is kind of odd.
It's funny, isn't it? Like, you could be working, whether you're acting, directing, writing, whatever it is, you can be working on the most bleak thing and just have the best of crack on the set. Do you know what I mean? I worked in a short film called Lambing, like I wrote and directed it, and Pat Short was in it. He's in my head now because I'm coming to Garage in a second. But we did the most brutal scene where he actually skinned a lamb. Like we had a pre-prepped dead and he skinned it. You know what I mean? I had great crack on that set. And it was the most depressing script ever.
Well, you can, when the work is good and you know the work is good and it's not exploitative and it's all of those things, and if you've got good friends and collaborators, which it can be great fun. That's not to say that it wasn't hard work, because it was hard work as well. We were making it on a shoestring. It was November, a very clear, very cold November. We were absolutely freezing, like absolutely and utterly freezing. But it was fun, you know.
I don't know, sometimes is it like when you have either like a bleak condition, like shooting in winter, any film I've ever shot in winter or any set I've helped out on in winter, you kind of tend to have more fun because people are just trying to survive and, you know, pump themselves up. Like maybe, I don't know, it's a very human response.
I think also Lenny runs a really happy team. Like he's really great at that, providing the kind of atmosphere on set that feels both properly collaborative, and yet he's leading it into his vision that's guiding it. Like he's brilliant at that.
Yeah. No, I've heard that before, and like to bump up to Garage then, which is 2007, so that's Lenny as well. It's also you, so you're collaborating a second time.
Yeah.
What I love about that film is like obviously Pat Short's in the lead. You won every award you can think of. Like it's another back-to-back really successful film, right? So was there a point in your head where you're like, oh my God, it wasn't this one-off thing about Adam and Paul. Like I'm a screenwriter now. Like this is what I do.
That
you have that kind of moment.
occurred to me ever. It was a difficult year because like the Garage was released on the day before Tom died. So it was released to the cinema. Now, also, we went into a really tight turnaround and made the film, made the TV show Prosperity straight afterwards, straight after shooting Garage. So Lenny and I were stressed to the max. I was absolutely stressed to the max. 4 hours of television done in 3 months. And then Tom got sick in the middle of it all. So it was a really unpleasant year. And subsequently, I didn't really write for a long time afterwards, which is kind of strange. I just left it all behind. I didn't feel Tom died on the 6th of October, and I was like, I felt that something had gone with me when he died, and I was like, okay, what do I do now? And I'd made some money, so I went off traveling for a bit and decided to go back acting. And, you know, it was a while before I got myself back together again to actually write.
Yeah. I mean, like, again, you know, I knew the timing of it must have been incredibly difficult because there's this crossover, you know, where you put all of your energy and yourself and your time into your work, and then separately you have your life. But the two, like, they do cross over, don't they?
Yeah.
That can't but happen. But I did wonder though, like what you see in Garage is like the teams are, you know, they're very rural, but there's loneliness. There's masculinity. In a way, on the surface level, it looks different to Adam and Paul, but it's not really. I mean, between the two films and then looking at your wider work, there's lots of recurring stuff. So,
yeah, there is. I mean, that idea of male loneliness is something that I'm really interested in, and interested in the question of whether, in very broad terms, and of course, you know, these are you know, making generalities and blah blah blah, but the idea that men can somehow experience loneliness in a different way to women, for instance, I find that interesting, or that men can isolate themselves more easily than women can, or the men sharing vulnerabilities can be difficult, and all of those things. And I was interested in that with Garage and placing this. You know, I was also interested in the history of Irish cinema, where it was always, you know, usually some American or some British person came in and made a film here back in the 60s and 70s, and there were big films, and there was always the village idiot in it, and he was a big turn, and he would do funny things, and I wanted to make a film about the village idiot, basically, except to give him dignity in some way. And I was also at the time the Celtic Tiger was roaring, etc. And I felt that there was something happening to the ecosystem of villages and towns where everything was beginning to be monetized, and the delicacy of how somebody like Josie could exist within that system was suddenly being snuffed out. And I thought that was it just hurt me to think about it in lots of ways. And I was from Ennis and County Clare, and the film is basically set in a place like Ennis, possibly a smaller place than Ennis, but it was trying to give a type of dignity to that character who was always treated peripherally in drama. And, but again, it shares some of the, I wrote it for Pat Short. Lenny says that we wouldn't have made it if Pat Short had said no when we sent in the script. And it was a difficult thing for Pat to take on at the time because, there's edgy stuff in it, he shows a porn movie to an underage boy, all of that sort of stuff, which, it comes with its own difficulties for an actor or somebody who's got, really broad appeal, etc. But we tried to, he immediately took it on, and we were delighted with it. But I do think there are those continuations of masculinity, especially looking at it. That even goes over into the work that I did on Viva and Rialto. Then the same, like it's a kind of a continuum.
Yeah, definitely. Like it's with Viva as well, especially. What I love about how I've heard you speak about that film in other interviews, like previous to this one, is how on the surface level, again, that might look like, oh, that's a, quote unquote queer film, which like as a filmmaker myself who happens to be queer, kind of drives me mad because that's not what it's about. Okay, these people are performing in drag or whatever, but they're fierce and they're confident and they're finding themselves, and it's about parent and child relationships and whatever. And so one of the questions I wanted to ask you is not about, how, people saying that you make films which happen to have queer themes or whatever, but how interesting it is to look at the themes that surround it. Like themes like loneliness and isolation and being forced as a younger person to constantly be aware of, being slightly outside something or having to fight for your identity. Like comparing even Viva and Rialto, like you've got a parent and child relationship in both films. Like,
yeah,
did you consciously repeat that theme, or is it something you think that you've come at?
If I'm working on something and I feel that there's much more, I usually continue on with this.
Yeah.
If there's more to do, with Viva, what I wanted to do was I wanted to take the extremes of masculinity and try and put them together in some way. I really love male effeminacy. I think it can be so beautiful, and for me, I was quite an effeminate child, and I felt that, there was something about effeminacy that became your greatest enemy in certain ways, where you were told you give yourself away with your effeminacy, and I was like, I want to embrace it actually. And then at the other end of the scale is this hyper masculinity, which is as much as of a performance as drag is in some ways, I think. And put them together, but I also wanted to have a father and son speak to each other, and I think that has as much relevance in Ireland as it does in Cuba. With Rialto, it's just about a man falling and how his own dishonesty to himself destroys his life, but is in danger of taking his family down as well. And funny enough, I think Rialto's more dangerous. I think it's the darkest thing that I've written, and I really don't want to see it anymore. It's so dark.
Yeah, I think there's something in particular that the father says to the son, where he's like, he said it out. Oh my God. Like, that's the kind of thing as a writer. I was just trying to imagine you, like, preparing for this interview. I was trying to imagine you actually writing that line. Because do you ever find that, like, you get self-conscious about people looking at your work and going, how much of Mark is actually in there? Yeah, does that ever occur to you?
Yeah, I think that people probably think I'm a much more serious person than I am, because I'm actually really light. I genuinely set out to write comedies, and they go a little bit left of field sometimes. And but also, you spend such a long time. When you're spending a long time with a script, jokes usually get thrown out the window because you get bored of them, But sometimes lines can surprise you. I like when surprise happens when you're at your desk and you write something and you just go, "Oh my God." And you have to get up and take a little walk for yourself and then come back and try and find it. I was really interested with Rialto with what the pain of not loving your own child. I find that painful even to think about.
Mm. It is, yeah, and it's just, again, it's funny, and I might be completely left of field here, but what I found really interesting again about both Viva and Rialto is if you introduce the theme of queerness or sexuality that's not run of the mill into a parent and child dynamic, like what you're doing is you're breaking the inheritance of identity. Either like, I inherit the right to be your father because I am, and that is fact, or a child going, I will not inherit this from you, this is wrong. And the people try to distance themselves, don't they, like from each other or from...
Yeah.
Do you find that? Like, I mean, I'm really drawn to the parent and child dynamic as well, but maybe for quite different reasons. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that anything I've ever, like, there is a scene that I have that's in both Adam and Paul, it's also in Rialto, of people holding babies and or hearing a baby cry and going in to get a baby. And I don't know why I find that always so moving. In Adam and Paul then going, who's the baba, baba, baba? Are you the baba, baba, baba? And then in Rialto, he goes and visits the rent boy and then goes in to see the rent boy holding the baby. And it's just, he finds that idea of innocence and then the depravity that he has in his own mind, or what he thinks is the depravity that he has in his own mind, is so jarring for him. And that's probably why he's not able to be a good parent in a way, because he can't get beyond himself or his own, what he feels are his own failures and his own moral failures.
God, I hadn't tweaked that actually, the recurring theme.
Yeah.
It's got, I see a psychoanalyst once a week just for my own, mental clarity or whatever, but they're really interested in cycles. And so sometimes you go in of a week and I think, well, actually I had a great week, like I don't need to talk to you. And he'll go, okay, what are you writing? And he'll say, well, that's exactly the same as the scene that you wrote in this other thing. And then I end up crying and having a big, this big
Not
thing.
laughing at you crying.
Yeah, well, there's nothing wrong with crying. I love a good cry,
Yeah.
But when you're like, right, and maybe acting as well, in kind of maybe the roles you choose to take on or what you bring to them, do you find yourself, and it's only with distance, once the film or the play is finished, or once the script is done, or once it's been out for 20 years and you're watching it again, do you ever catch yourself putting yourself into something, but, only kind of after the fact, if that makes sense?
Well, I think, yes, I think there is always some of you in there, simply because whatever is being written on the page is coming through you. I don't tend to write autobiographically, though I definitely do bring my own perspective to things. So there is a bits of that. As to, I think, you come back to work sometimes and you just go, oh, Jesus. Yeah, that was what was going on. But there's another point to that, I suppose, which is also, what does a piece of work actually mean? And I don't think that's I don't know, genuinely. I think it finds meaning with its audience, and that's just about it. Does that make any sense?
No, it does. It does, definitely. I think I kind of relate to that as well. And it's just funny because you never get to ask other writers these nosy questions, do you? Like, you're kind of a formula like this. But I wanted to ask you, just as we're on Rialto and Viva as well, just about the whole idea of when a story is allowed to be told. Like, I think if you swap the chronology of your films, you know what I mean? If Rialto had come first, it might be a very different reception. If Viva had come after, it would have been quite different. So I'm just wondering, what influence have kind of social expectations had on your work? Like, so many people have these grand ideas about like who should be allowed to play a gay character, who should be allowed to write them, all this kind of thing. I'm of the unpopular opinion that, like, look, if someone's being marginalized, like, I think trans actors are a really good example of that. It's like, stop bypassing them and let them audition. But at the end of the day, the right person needs to get the job. And maybe the film needs to be made and people need to watch it and be uncomfortable. And maybe that's a good thing. Do you know, it's so new.
I think there really are no hard and fast rules with these things, to be honest with you. I think the whole thing about trans and trans visibility is one of the things that I think that mitigate against putting a non-trans person in a trans role. The idea that trans actors are not given chances. And so I would think that, but I think with straight and gay roles, gay actors play straight roles, straight actors play gay roles. I don't really have any problem with that. But there are some roles where I go, gay man should have played that, or a gay woman should have played that. Because the theme is so specific, or the theme is so, like, for instance, writing about, I don't know, elderly gay men who have been through AIDS, and you were to cast, I think it would be really worth getting somebody who'd lived through that, rather than have a straight person. But I don't tend to get offended by all of those things. I think the question of trans visibility is a different question, though, you know what I mean? And I think that probably mitigates more towards have a trans person play that role.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I completely agree. Like, it's just so nuanced. I think that's the kind of thing that you could spend about 4 hours in the pub arguing. You could end up contradicting yourself by the end of the conversation, depending on who you're talking to. Do you like annoy?
Yes, but there are no hard and fast rules on any of that. I think you just have to go from project to project. It also, like, there are these definitions about what is a gay film anyway, what is a queer film, what is an Irish film, what is, can you have, a queer film with entirely straight cast, but a queer director?
I don't know, but yeah.
Or, does that make it a queer film? Or, all of those things, Almodovar used a lot of straight actors, but they're really queer films.
Yeah, I know. God, it brings me right back to, like, my master's in film UCC, watching Almodovar stuff. The primary palette means this, that, and the other in the music and everything. But is it a good film? Yes, it is. I think that's the main thing. But I wanted to ask you actually about writing. So things that you haven't grown up with and haven't experienced, really. Like, obviously, Viva is set in Cuba. And
yeah.
Do you know, what was that like? Like, going to a different culture where, like, you're the writer, you're coming to kind of give your very nuanced opinion, you're waiting for the story to come to you and to write something. What was it like going there and knowing, like, I did not grow up in Cuba? Like,
well, I would argue that Almodovar was me going to a different country as well. Like, I'm from County Clare, so yeah. I didn't have any experience of drug addicts or a big city at that point when I came, and I started taking notes and all of that. Literally, I do think I'm an observational writer. I do, for instance, I walk around the city all the time and I listen to people speaking on buses, and I listen to people speaking on the Lewis, and I take notes on stories that I see on the street all the time. And that's genuinely what I did in Cuba. I tried to get low on the ground. I stayed there for quite a while. I hung around with lots of drag queens, and I went to all the parties, all the madness that went on, the stealing of wigs and revenge destroying of wigs and all of that sort of stuff, all the madness that went on there. And from there, I just had a collection of stories, and I went home and I wrote it in English, and then we worked with the translator who translated it into a kind of a vernacular Cuban Spanish. So it was literally just me trying to put myself aside and look at the society that I was seeing. I also was lucky in that it was Cuba, and I just fell in love with Cuba. Like, I just love it. It's, it's a pretty gorgeous place, and it's a fantastic culture, and I love the drag culture there because, I've probably described this a million times before, but the drag queens there, when they come out on stage, they sing their fucking life. Like, they're like, we're on oh, wow, these love songs, these really, so there's no kind of the London drag queens or the Dublin drag queens, there's ironic attachment in comedy. There's very little of that. They take themselves very seriously. The beauty thing is really important, but also the passion of these love songs, and they sing their lives out and they throw themselves on the stage, and it's great fun, you know. And I kind of loved that life and that passion, and I could see why a young boy like him was just wanted to step out on stage and transform into something, you know.
Yeah. Oh no, that's gorgeous. And actually, I meant to list that in one of the tangential themes earlier on, is like music. If you're learning to express yourself, you know what I mean? It's one of the main things. It transcends all languages, doesn't it?
When you become a goth or an emo or a rocker or a punk or whatever, I love all of that youth culture stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, as you get older, it tends to maybe mellow out a bit. But these drag queens, they don't mellow out a bit. They're like, it's self-definition through these gorgeous torch songs. And they play their own tragedy on the stage. It's gorgeous.
Yeah. Oh, it's brilliant. But it's, I wondered also, just like on language, right? Do you know anyone who, since On Colin Keown has come out, has downloaded Duolingo and is now learning Irish, you know, in a bid to get Irish language work?
I don't know of anybody. I am actually studying Irish at the moment, but it's simply because I was always guilty about not having good Irish, and I don't think I would ever use it professionally. But Colin Keown is, like, I was a script editor on that, and I read the English language versions of which when it arrived to me, and I was just amazed by how brilliant that team are. Colin McLean, and he's such a brilliant writer. Oh my God.
It's fantastic. I mean, I love that film. I love it. You know,
it's gorgeous.
Till you go to the
gorgeous,
cinema
gorgeous.
And it goes so quiet at the end, and then I blew my nose at the wrong moment, and who I was dating at the time, my partner was like, "Would you shut up, Jill?" That just interrupted the silence at the end of this huge sniffles, you know. But it's just interesting. I what I found was, like, I did a film in Irish a couple of years ago. Now, with very basic Irish script. Again, I had help with a translator or whatever. But it was a really lovely experience, because when you're writing, like, even though I had to now go to the dictionary and go back and forth, even the fact that, like, you wear your emotions in Irish, like, the penny really dropped for me. I was like, oh, this is what Miss Ní Húlaván meant in secondary school Irish. I was like, I'm never going to speak that language ever again. Actually, do you know, I might. It's just funny, like, as a country, how we're not actually communicating through Irish. You know, even this conversation right now, you know what I mean? It's just, I don't know if it's to do with the lockdown or what, but I think people are so much more curious about it now than they were.
I think there's a kind of curiosity definitely about, and also a disappointment in ourselves for having let it go so far or something like that. That's what drove me back to doing lessons. And I've really enjoyed it. And I think the language is beautiful. It's really tough though.
Yeah.
Grammatically, it's really difficult for me. I'm like, oh, Jesus, the Mokinilik. The subjunctive, but like, I learned Spanish, and Spanish also has a subjunctive mode in their verbs, so I had been kind of picking up on that. So, like, but the subjunctive all over. We just don't use it in English, you know. So, but I am enjoying my time learning.
That's it. So you're actually doing Duolingo. You're actually, like, in-person lessons. Like, how are you going about it?
I'm actually doing lessons once a week, a 2-hour lesson every week. And it's great.
That's good. It's weird. You're the first person I've met since the film, like, who's not actually doing it on Duolingo. It's totally wild. I suppose you're doing it correctly, aren't you?
Well, Duolingo, I'd give up within about 2 days.
Yeah, it's desperate. I actually made a mistake this morning. I had a great streak going, and then I did spell something correctly, but it auto-corrected it back to English, and I got the answer wrong. I was like an absolute antichrist. It's like the worst thing that happened so far today. But I have to ask you a couple of practical things because of the nature of the podcast. And I suppose one of the things I wanted to talk to you about was misconceptions about what screenwriters actually do. So, like, I find that everyone has a very romantic idea of what it is to be, you know, a writer or an actor or a director. And because they see people doing red carpets and they see them going to film festivals and all these accolades and praise and all the rest of it, but they don't understand the work that goes into it. Like, do you actually enjoy the process, like, consistently?
Well, I would ask, does anybody ever really enjoy work? Work is work. But I suppose I do appreciate the challenges that it presents to me, and it also gives you an opportunity to investigate ideas and all of that. It's an interesting endeavor. Like it has its practical side about, like, I need to get the page counts right. I need to format this all correctly. And it has this idea of truth and artifice and how you balance those two things. How do you force characters together? How do you find truth within dialogue, or dialogue that is truthful and characterful and is not just there carrying story? And all of those things, like, I just obsessively rewrite all the time. So I'm in scenes and I, like, from the day I start, I just am constantly rewriting until I get to a point where I suddenly feel like it's all settled. Everything's settled. I can send it off now. But it's, it's long hours. And when you're in writing mode, you really don't have time for other people in the world. You're in your own head, and in the evenings you might go for a walk, or some people might go to the pub or whatever, just to decompress a little bit, because because you can be stuck way high in your head. It's good to go to the gym afterwards, actually.
Yeah, actually, I'm kind of
Special way.
bullying myself into doing that as well at the moment. It's not happening. I'm thinking about it a lot. I haven't actually gone yet. But that's actually, you've kind of touched on the next thing I was going to ask you, which is, like, do, like, the things that you need from other people in your life, whether it's like friends, partner, family, whatever, do those things change depending on where you are in your process? Like, you could be writing something out of passion, you could be writing something because it's a paid gig and you have to, like, pay your rent, the mortgage or whatever, or you could be balancing those two things while also taking on a role. Like, how do you negotiate what you need from the people around you and your routine?
My most productive year I ever had was the year of lockdown, and I was living alone, and I had nobody else coming near me. I got a lot of work done. But by the end of that, you also are hollowed out as an individual, and you have no direction in life, and you have no relationships, and you're emotionally isolated. So you really have to be careful about it. And it's good to, I'm not one of those people who has masses of friends and big parties and all that. I have very few friends, and I work at home, so my home space, I'm very careful about inviting people into it, because it is a workspace as well, and I need to have time to be able to. So like, you have to be careful of all that, and you've got to have friends who understand all of it. If you're in, if you're hitting deadlines, or you're in the middle of really the meat and bones of something, you really have to lock yourself away for a while.
I mean, as you said, though, it can be so difficult to explain that to someone you're trying to maintain a relationship with, whether it's a friendship or, a practical, like a work relationship that's not creative. I can't touch you for 2 weeks. It's very hard to hear.
Yeah, it is. And those are the sacrifices, I suppose, that you make if this is what you want. I also think, though, that writing gives you something as well. It doesn't just take away or make you lonely or whatever. It also gives you insight, and I think it can make you a better person.
Yeah, I've heard several times that you're a prolific journal writer. Is that still the case?
Yeah, I write a journal every day. So it's a page a day. And it's been going on for like 30 years. It's really, really boring. Like, the diary is really boring. But I've charted things in it. Sometimes death and loss, the breakup of relationships, but also creative endeavors, like starting something, moving through all the hoops with something, getting it into people, and then the process of getting something made is all in there. So you can go back and check yourself I often sometimes will get to the middle of a screenplay and I hit this question that I call the why question, like, why the fuck am I doing this? And sometimes it's really hard to answer that question. And I would say, you become stuck and you become like, oh, Jesus, I don't know how to figure this out. This is the worst. I've never been through something like this. And then you go back to 2016 and you open it up and you go, okay, there's the same thing happened. And you know that it's just a cycle and you got to plow through it.
Right. It's like getting reassurance from your past self, though, isn't it? You know?
Yeah, it is a bit. It's a very dull and surprisingly bitchy document.
I love it. I absolutely love it.
But the worst thing is that some poor, I don't know, somebody's going to have to either take all of these diaries and dump them, or I don't know what. It's I don't care what happens to them, and they're definitely not for publication, that's for sure. But it is a good thing to write every day, even if it's just your diary.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. It was so funny because, again, I heard you say that in a previous podcast. So I've been doing that now for about, since the lockdown, actually. I started doing my morning pages every day, right?
Mm-hmm.
It goes through variations of like, oh my God, my handwriting's lovely, versus nothing happened today, versus I'm sick of listening to myself write the same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
I had kind of the thought, I wrote something awful one day and it was about a family member, and I wrote under it, if you're reading this, I'm sorry, but look, it has to be said, just in case, because you never know who's going to end up with them. But like, I often wondered, I don't know if you can relate to this, like looking at other people in your life that you have to interact with, whether it's a character you've made up, and you're throwing a situation at them on the page and you're waiting for them to react, or a real person in your real life or whatever. And I've often thought, like, if you journaled every day, I think you'd be a bit nicer in this scenario. Has that ever crossed your mind?
I think it is, there's something about self-reflection that helps you through difficulties. I would also urge all writers to come off social media. If you want to get it and done, get off Facebook, get off Twitter. I am on Instagram, but I just dip in and out of that. It's kind of harmless, but like I think it's poisonous for a writer being on those things.
In what way?
It's just listening to people going blah 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 all day, and it fills your head, and you can't get away from it, and you need peace and quiet. I think the best thing that any writer could do is read other people's scripts, or read novels, and keep, like, reading scripts is a great thing. I love doing it, actually, and try and keep away from that the screeching monkeys.
It's a very it's a very interesting way of putting it. Like, I had a friend recently who tried to get off Instagram, and I would see her online, in the middle of the night and so I started sending her stuff I knew she wouldn't like. Right, she doesn't like potty humor or whatever, so I started sending her memes about farting or whatever. And the note was always, listen, if you weren't on Instagram, you wouldn't see this, would you? And she didn't like it.
Well, I was a big Twitter person. I used to love Twitter, and then Elon Musk took over, and I thought, I don't want anything to do with that arsehole. So I deleted my account, which was quite traumatic at the time.
Yeah, because you were prolific on Twitter. I remember, like, during the first campaigns and stuff, like the marriage quality, like, it was one of the top. If you searched for it, do you know what I mean? Your tweets inevitably would be near the top.
I was on it all the time, and occasionally now I come up with what I think is a really good tweet, and I go, what do I do with that now? I just shout it out my window. But I'm a happier person having left all that nonsense behind.
Yeah, I think, like, what you're describing as well, and I could be wrong, is almost a side effect of COVID, where you have to sit with yourself in the middle of this pandemic and go, what works for me and what doesn't. Do you know, like,
yeah, I think lots of people had that reevaluation moment during COVID, and what it was that in their life that was working for them, and all of that.
Mm-hmm. It's funny. It's like, we're near the top of the hour now, so there's one or two other things I was going to ask you, but I was going to ask you about the most practical part of being a screenwriter, because or being a functioning and successful filmmaker. the ability to kind of segment yourself into two different things. You know, you're the creative person, but you also have to kind of manage yourself almost like a small business. And no one teaches you how to do that, like balancing your taxes, even like something as basic as that. If you're combining like PAYE and the artist exemption and like getting paid for projects and stuff like that, like you sat on the leaving cert, do you know, have you, you know, if you could go back and talk to yourself before you did Adam and Paul and before all this happened, like what practical stuff would you want to have known?
I wouldn't have listened to myself anyway. I'm somebody who learns through going through something, so I can't take. There's only one way. There's a guaranteed way of me not reading a book is by somebody telling me I should read this book, and I will definitely not read it then. So my advice wouldn't have been any good. I was lucky in lots of ways in that my career was slow. You know, I was in my 30s by the time Adam and Paul was made, in Garage and all of those, and then there was a lull, and then I came back with Viva, and then this is the film work, because I was always doing theatre anyway in between times, but and then Rialto and other stuff. So I was already kind of just I was slowly able to put processes together for myself. I think the most important thing, like all your taxes and all that, you can sort all that. Get an agent, you'll be able to sort all that, and they'll be able to do all your contract stuff for you. You don't ever have to worry about that. They'll tell you whether what you're getting paid is right, whether your conditions are right. And the most important thing a writer can do is choosing themselves who it is that they want to work with, who are the people that they really dig and they want to be making films with, because it is a collaborative process. And then just practical things like when you're writing a script, if you get 3 pages done every day, you're absolutely laughing. You're flying it. Oh. Because at the end of the week, you have 21 pages if you work the weekends. You know, by the end of the month, you've practically got a screenplay written.
It's very exciting when you put it like that, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very, but it is, you know, that's basically it. And you just got to keep going. Like I remember I was talking to one young writer and they said, I don't think I'll ever finish the script, because you have to finish. And I was going, why? And they goes, well, I've got a first act, and it's perfect, and I'm afraid that I'll break it if I continue on. And I was like, well, I'm afraid to say no. You actually have nothing. Because you've nothing. You know, like, you might admire the pages you put down that is the start of something. But, like, I was kind of upset for them.
Yeah.
Because you gotta barrel through and get it to an end and then start reworking it and all of that sort of stuff. You know, you have to finish.
It's terrible, but it's true. It reminds me of something that someone said to me when I was about 15 or 16, and I was a tortured poet, or so I thought. You know, I was going to all these poetry events, whatever. And there was one guy, his name was Dave, and he was an older guy who used to speak at all these, and he said, if something's not working, or if you think something's working so well that you don't know where to go, take out the part that you absolutely love, or pretend it doesn't exist, and then continue writing, and you'll see where all the problems are. And like, I've done that before, and then you end up getting rid of the thing you love and it never comes back.
Yeah, you can have a screenplay that you think is revolving around this one particular sequence that you think is divine, and you get to the end of the screenplay and you realize that sequence has to go. Like, everything else is better. Like, it's just one of those things. And keep that open mind. Learning how to cut your own drama as well is really, really a key thing, because your dialogue will generally, on a first draft, be a little bit overblown, long in places, all that. And learning how to cut, that sometimes you can drop a scene and it'll speed up the action and all of those sort of things. That's literally about sitting down with your work and paying attention. Sometimes I get young writers and they'll say, can I send you a script? And I'll say, yeah, sure. And I'll read it. But when I get to it, formatting's all wrong. There's really bad spelling mistakes and really bad grammar mistakes in it and lots of confusion. And I go, they just haven't sat down and done a careful proofread before they send it out. And you really have to, because, like, you're asking somebody to take time out of their lives to read your script. And it's kind of rude if it's like inviting somebody home for dinner and the place is a mess, you know?
That's actually a really good analogy. Yeah, it's funny. I get that a lot as well. Like people said, like mostly now students, because like I mean, I've yet to write my first solo feature or anything like that. But it's exactly the same thing. Someone's a couple of steps ahead of you, and they start sending you work. And someone said, "Would you mind having a quick look at this?" And I was, yeah, no bother. Again, same thing. Pay it forward. Be sound. Be the person you wish you had when you were starting out. And this person sends me their short script, and it was 218 pages long. I was like, I'm not reading that. No way. I'm not doing it.
Life is very short, and like you can't invest in a 200 page script. Like, it's a very long script.
Yeah. No, you can't. It's so unfortunate. Listen, I have loads of other things I'd love to ask you, but we're getting up to the hour, and I know you're busy and you're all talked out today. But Mark, it's lovely chatting to you finally one-on-one. And thanks so much for coming on the podcast as well. Best of luck with your screening at the weekend as well. You must be very proud. I hope you are very, very proud of Adam and Paul.
I am, yeah. I am. I'm deeply proud of that piece of work.
It's fantastic. And best of luck. I know you're working away on loads of projects at the moment. If there's anything you can tell us about that's coming up, brilliant. I know you might not be able to.
Well, I have an odd biopic of the jazz pianist Bill Evans. It's a film called Everybody Digs Bill Evans. There's a British director on it, and we're hoping to get it into production at the end of the year. And I'm doing an adaptation of the play that I wrote a few years ago called Conversations After Sex. And I think early next year we're hoping to get going with that one. And I'm adapting a novel for American television, and I'm adapting a manga for live action TV show as well. So there's lots of American work going around.
That's brilliant. It's such a cool mix of stuff as well. I wish I'd asked you that sooner now, so I could ask you how you're balancing all that. But sure, look.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I can't wait to see Adam and Paul on the big screen this weekend.
Great.
Hopefully bump into you in person. But just thanks again for taking the time to chat with me, and best of luck with everything.
Thank you so much. See you again.
Thanks, Mark.
Ciao.
Thank you for listening. This podcast has been made possible with the support of Screen Ireland.
So make sure to visit filmireland.ie, where you can subscribe to our newsletter and find out more about what's going on in Irish cinema and never miss another podcast.